Around.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for coming, joining us for another episode of the LMTV Sharkfest, and in particular demand performance by our very good friend Paul Offord on Transum. There you go.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Paul. Good evening.
Hi, Denny. How you doing?
Oh, good. I love seeing you, man. I love seeing you in the British sunshine.
Yeah, it's a bit grey at the moment, but yeah, usually.
Okay. Hey, and good afternoon, Tim.
How y'all doing? I
Hey,
hope everybody's doing
you're
great.
giving us a slightly different angle. I get to see more of your basement today.
I'll let you see it even free of charge.
Wow, look at all the Jesus. That's a geek, man. That is a geek. So Paul, I'm sure we already have quite a few viewers. We're anxious to hear about the second part of your presentation.
Sure.
I just realized that I never asked you an important question last time, which is that you have presented Transum to different audience, but it was the first time that you did that to the Sharkfest audience. And
Yeah.
I assume, like every other population, some of them have heard of your software and some of them have not. What were their response? What were the feedback? What were their
Well, actually, it's funny you should ask, and this wasn't lined up between Denny and I before we started this session, but this week Janice sent back the feedback she'd had from attendees to the sessions. And the attendees for the Transum sessions really gave some really quite flattering remarks, actually. They thought that both the subject was good and they really loved the tool. So the feedback
and I
has been
assume most of them didn't get paid to lie, so pretty genuine feedback, I say.
Yeah.
And it's a tough audience. It's a very tough audience.
Yeah, no, it was really good. The feedback was good. Actually, I had really good feedback on all my sessions, which is rather good. But certainly people like Transum. They like what you can do with it. So generally good, yeah.
Did you learn anything? I mean, my experience with product always is that the wrong people are always buying it, right? You think you're addressing this audience, and then all of a sudden you realize that no, it's actually a lot of people are finding different use for it.
Yeah, well, you know what? The thing that struck me in the session was that out of the 3 sessions that I ran, I had less interaction with the crowd on the Transum session than I had with the others, and I really was quite concerned at one point, thinking, is this just not of interest, or what's happening? But I don't know if they were so blown away with the thing that they just sat there in awe, or what. I don't know what it was.
Well, that's usually my story, and I'm.
Yeah, that's the line I'm spinning.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I can tell you that everybody last year when Paul was there, everybody was, well, I loved having you, and everybody is that I've ever heard after you speak has been very complimentary.
Yeah, it was. I had good feedback at Berkeley as well. Yeah, when we did the last Berkeley one, yeah, it was good.
I'd love to have you and Tony try to give a presentation. He's got a French Canadian accent. You got a British accent. All we need is a Scotsman and an Irishman. We'd have a hell of a time then, right?
No, he's the Italian, isn't he? He's an
Italian.
He can do the really good Italian.
Oh, Kenny, man, yeah.
All right. So Paul, whenever you're ready.
Okay, all right, so let's sort out my screen share.
Uh-oh, here goes the network.
And just a reminder to our live audience, we do have a Q&A session, so but like everything else with Google Plus or Google, you have to find it because it changes every week. You have to find a button that says Q&A, and then you can ask questions, and we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, welcome everyone to Transum Part 2. Just a quick agenda. I thought we'd just have a quick recap on the response time element model, just to explain what we're trying to achieve with Transum. I'm going to have a quick look at a web application problem. Then we'll look at a slow file server issue. I'd like to show you how the latest version of Transum, R10, can also look at DNS and IPv6. And I just want to outline the fact that we've actually cured the T-Shark problem we had, and so you can now use it for with T-Shark as well. So I'll explain why you might use that. So the response time element model, we looked at this last week. Just consider the fact that we've got a web request coming into a web server. The web server thinks about the request and decides it needs some data from the database. It sends a request to the database, but that request is split across 4 packets. The time it takes to transmit that whole request, and so those 4 packets, we define as request spread. And request spread is affected by things like queuing, retransmissions, TCP window sizes, all those good things. Then in this case, the database will munch around the request, and this time it takes to do that we call service time, and then it will send a response back to the web server. And the time it takes to transmit that response, we call that the response spread. And the total time for this interaction with the database we call APDU response time. So APDU response time, first request packet to last response, service time, last request packet to first response. And so then the web server may form the page out of the data it's received, send the response back to the browser, and we've got a bit of response spread there as well. So this was just something we covered last week, but just to remind everyone about the terminology here. So I'm going to have a look at an example with a system called TMS. It's a simple workflow system. It's only got really 3 components: the user's web browser, a web server, and a database. It lists items of work which are called tickets. Normally when you click on one of these tickets in a summary display, it takes less than a second to display, but intermittently the users are experiencing a 5+ second response time. So I thought we'd take a look at the actual problem. So this is the problem occurring, and you can see that we click on an item and it's quite responsive, sub-second response most of the time. And we click on this item, and up here in the top left you can see the little spinning thing in Firefox showing that it's trying to get data, and eventually the data's delivered. And that's around 6 seconds. And this is just sending a ping marker to mark the problem transaction. So this is just a marker that we'll see in the trace data that we look at in a second. So ping causes an ICMP echo packet. I'm sure the people on this session will know that. So we'll start off by looking at the HTTP trace, and here's the system, just the main components of the system. We've got a PC, we've got some network, we've got a single Linux server that's running a web server with an application written in PHP, and then a database. Very simple application, very common throughout all enterprises, really. Okay, so let's look at the trace. Can you see my trace?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so I've preloaded the trace, and we can see that we've already started to pick up some of the components, some of the trace elements that are added using Transum. So here are the Transum details. We can see that this particular packet, this particular message request response pair has just a single packet for the request and a single packet for the response. But we can also see, if we look at this one, we've got a single packet for the request, but we've got several packets for the response. And over here I see all those numbers that we talked about. So APDU, response time, service time, request spread, response spread. Now what I can do is just very simply type in a filter term and I can reduce this. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to also display ping packets. So this here is my marker, the marker that marked the fact that the transaction prior to this marker was a problem. Now in this case the trace was stopped immediately after, but you can imagine that if I had 100 gigabytes of trace, I could go searching for the marker first and I'd know that my problem transaction was just before. I use markers that have got quite distinctive lengths, so this one's 101 bytes, so I call this a ping 101 marker. And you can see that just before that I've got a 6-second response time, and it's for a get for ticket view, which is, if we go back to the video, you'll see that we're actually getting ticket view is the URL that we're trying to process when we see the delay. Now this is a bit simplistic, but what I can do is I can just simply order the response times, looking at the highest response time. And what I do note here is that the response time is 6 seconds, and Transum has measured the service time as 6 seconds. And although we do have some response spread, it's only 589 microseconds. So what this is telling me is this isn't a network problem, this is a server problem. And really, once you get used to interpreting these numbers, that's how quick it can be for you to distinguish between a network problem and a server problem, or an application problem.
This would be great to see aberrant behavior, because when you're looking at so many web apps being hacked,
yeah,
you want to look for that massive behavioral change.
Could be, yeah, could be. So anyway, let's go back to our diagram. Now, so I explained that we've got a web server and a database server. And now we're going to have a quick look at these interactions between the web server and the database server, because obviously we've seen 6 seconds here between the web request entering the server and the response coming back. What we want to know is this a database issue? So let's switch into the database trace. Not that one. So here's the database trace. Now, this is Transum configured out of the box, and you can see that Transum's picking up the time it takes to establish the connection, the SYN/SYN-ACK time, but it hasn't picked up any of the database times. And that's because by default, this particular database, which is called Postgres, is not pre-configured into Transum, but it's quite easy to add it. So we simply right-click on the label Transum, go to Preferences, TCP Service Ports, we add 5432, which is the port for Postgres, and immediately we get the numbers. So now we can see the numbers, and I again can order it by time, and you can see that we haven't got any database requests that take longer than 37 milliseconds to execute. So if this is a database issue, it's not a slow single query, it's not a slow single store procedure, it would have to be literally thousands of requests to make up the 6 seconds that we see that the user experiences. And as in this trace, we've only got, I think, about 200 entries or something. Entries, it's not a database issue. So what that enables us to do is we can now say that this problem, this 6-second delay that the user intermittently experiences, is somewhere inside this web server. It's not in the database, it's not in the PC, because we see the 6 seconds at this trace point here, so it's got to be between these two trace points. So that's what you can do with Transum very quickly to look at a performance problem with a web application.
Very nice.
So let's move on to something slightly different. This time we're going to look at the performance of, the complaint is that a user tries to open a PDF that's stored on a file server, and it takes a long time to open. It takes 30 seconds to open, whereas they were expecting it to open in 3 or 4 seconds. So we have a trace taken here on the PC in this case. Let's have a look at that trace. Just realised I haven't got the right trace loaded up, so let's just load that up quickly. That's that one.
And while you're doing that, Paul, I mean, if you have a computer that doesn't have enough memory or threads that can run, you could find out pretty quickly by looking at this. You could,
because if it were a server, you'd see high service times.
Right, yeah.
And if it were the end user PC, what you would see is, even though the user experienced a 6-second response time, you'd find that all the interactions to the back-end servers would complete much more quickly.
Yeah, so that way you can get rid of finger pointing right there, because that happens a lot.
Absolutely. So here I've loaded up the trace for the file server access, and we can go down here and probably find reference. This is the document that was, so we can see that the user was trying to load a document called Network Trace Analysis Strategies Whitepaper.pdf. Snappy title. Okay, so this is the network trace. Again, I can simply order it by APDU response time. I go to the top, and hey presto, we've got some slow responses. You know, for here we're getting about 52K of data, and it's taking 3.5 seconds just to get 52K of data off of the file server. And really that should take, I don't know, 10 milliseconds or something. Anyway, a lot less than 3.5 seconds. And you can see we've got repeated problems here. What you also notice though, especially with these ones, is that we've got very high response spread values. So for a 2.5 second time, we've got response spread of more than a second. So it's taking a long time to traverse the network. But it also appears that we've got a service issue. But if we dig into the way that SMB works a little further, what we find, and if we now hone in on one of these, so typically what I would do at this point is I'd find maybe the first one of these that was slow. Well, actually I could do the 3-second one. I'd reorder the packets back into their natural order, and now I'd start looking at this actual transaction, and I can very quickly, I showed this last week where I copy this value out of the filter term, whack that into here, hit enter, and now I've picked out everything that resides within the time frame of this slow transaction. And what we also notice here is that we've got other things mixed in going in the same session, even while this read request is being satisfied. So what we need to just consider is with SMB, you can send a read request, you can start to get a response, but actually you can send another read request. But the response to the second read won't occur until you've completed the response to the first read. And so once you unravel this and you use Transum to do this analysis, what you find is this is simply a bandwidth congestion issue. We're trying to overload the bandwidth as we're getting the data. So again, fairly simple, straightforward analysis, quickly home in on the right area, look at the packets in a bit more detail, and you can soon determine what the cause of the problem is. So, okay, that dropped out of my my slideshow when I didn't expect it, but that's okay. So that's my 2 examples of you know, case studies. So the other thing I wanted to demonstrate was that in previous releases of Transum, for those who are familiar with it, we haven't calculated DNS response times, and we haven't calculated anything relating to IPv6. And thanks to our friend Vladimir, who sent me a trace the other day, which is quite safe because it's not got anything confidential in it. I'm able to demonstrate both at the same time. So here we see, and this is Transum behavior out of the box now. We've got DNS queries going on here. We can see how long the DNS queries take to be satisfied, and we can clearly see over here, if we look at the addressing, that we've got IPv6 addressing. So we've managed to, with Vladimir's help, we've managed to incorporate code to support IPv6 and also to automatically measure response times for DNS. And in fact, it will also measure response times for other UDP stream types. So that's a big step forward with R10. And the final thing I was going to mention was that we use T-Shark to batch process large amounts of data. So say we've got 200 trace files and we want to get all of the response time information out of those files for a particular URL or a particular database call even. We can set up filters and use Transum to give us all of that data in a CSV, which we can then pull into Excel and analyze and plot and do whatever we want. So for us internally, T-Shark support was really important, and we've struggled for some time to get it to work with the Transum plugin, but it does now work. So that's a big benefit for us, and I hope it's a big benefit for our Transum users. The very final thing I was going to show you was how to get Transum, because we've changed this slightly. So before you could get Transum, and you still can get Transum R9 directly from this part of our site without signing in. You can download it just here. But one of the things we're keen to do is create a community that shares information about use of Transum and also provide a level of support for bug fixing. And so we've now moved this into the signed in area. You can create an account totally free of charge, and we hold with our usual promise we won't use your account to spam you, and we won't pass on the information to anyone else. And if you have a particularly sensitive situation, probably the best thing to do is create a dummy Google account or something and use that. Anyway, if we come into the signed in part of TribeLab, you now find this area here, and here you can download the actual plugin. Here's the support forum where we've already started to get some activity on there to fix problems. You've got access to the updated user guide, and there's access to a couple of videos, and I'll probably add these videos that we've been recording actually into this section of the TribeLab site.
Very nice. Put a lot of effort in this, Paul.
Yeah. Yes, there has been. I've had a lot of help, I have to say. It's not all me. There's a lot of people in the background helped me with this, including people like Vladimir, and you know, in the past, Tony's helped me by testing out the early releases of Transum, and I've had help from Graham Bailey and Stuart Kendrick, and there's all sorts of people who have really pitched in. So, yeah.
Those are all good people you named. They've all been.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I have to mention my friend Lars in the Nordics, because he's very keen and he gives me a lot of feedback on this type of stuff. So his feedback's been quite invaluable, and he actually found a couple of bugs which in an earlier release of Transum, and that was useful to us as well.
I can see this being used for IPv6 to discover, you know, neighborhood transit times. In the community, when they do the ICMP search. Wow,
now that's something I hadn't thought about. Okay, good input. Yeah. Okay.
That's what the hackers are doing now, but they're doing it a little bit differently.
Hey, Paul. So we're doing this LMTV session under what we've been calling the LMTV Sharkfest.
Yeah.
the idea of that is that this is the place where we would display or present recorded sessions and interviews, and also presentations by their sponsors. But it's up until now, it's always been kind of tied to the event itself. But of course, the idea of the LMTV Sharkfest, once we kind of do all the shows, the stuff that's actually tied to the event, then the idea of LMTV Sharkfest is the sort of extended experience to what we would call the off seasons, right? What about the 360 days that we don't have Sharkfest, right?
Yeah.
So your presentation today is kind of the end of that, or the beginning of the transition. That going forward, we'll be doing things that are not exactly at the event, but is very closely tied to it. And Tony Fortunato will be doing a presentation on the 18th of August about just going back to the basics, just kind of quick start guide and stuff. Now, coming back to your presentation in Transum, I'm just wondering, as you're kind of thanking your supporters and collaborators, I'm thinking that maybe we have part 1, part 2, and kind of, I was just wondering, should there be a part 3 that's sort of Transum testimonial or Transum?
Yeah, we could do a couple of things spring to mind. A testimonial would be good, and the viewpoint of someone else other than me. I could get one of my colleagues to do it, but I would like someone from outside of Advanced 7 to do it. That would be good.
Well, listen, this is speaking as a marketing person. It's always good to have someone else talk about you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
That is the trick.
As long as it's positive. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if it's constructive and it's negative, I don't mind.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is it would be good to show how you can tie in Transum with things like Excel. I mean, in an enterprise environment, often what you're having to do is produce reports with graphs showing performance and comparative performance and things like that. And once you start to transition between, getting Wireshark to do all the interpretation and decode, and Transum to produce the figures you need, and then summarizing all of that with Excel, you've got a really powerful toolkit. And 2 parts of that are totally free, which is Wireshark and Transum. And quite honestly, you could just as easily use an open source spreadsheet package as well. So this is powerful stuff. I think the only thing is that it's like with everything to do with Wireshark, you've got to have some knowledge of what you're doing with Wireshark. So that's where a session by Tony is invaluable. You need the basics. You can't. It's not the sort of thing where you can just press a button and produce results. You need some sort of level of understanding of what it's presenting to you and what you're being told. Yeah. And some of the sessions at Sharkfest are targeted specifically at people who are new to this. So,
yeah. And the other thought is that kind of tangent to the Transum experiences is that I'm sure there are other add-ons similar to Transum that has kind of add value to the community, and I was wondering if going forward, if you might just keep an eye out for people like that, and then maybe we could invite them on and have them talk about it. So I think that's just another way of kind of fulfilling our self-imposed objective of extending the Sharkfest experience to the off season.
Yeah,
one thing perhaps we should consider is have we thought about getting Jasper on to talk about Trace Wrangler? I mean, he's written this very sophisticated product.
Well, Tim, that one's got your name on it.
Yeah.
Right? You know Jasper, right?
Yeah, I can call him up.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Let's do that.
I think that would be good because it's a sophisticated product, and again, it's totally free of charge. The guy has put in so much effort on this thing, and it's very powerful.
He was the first guy. I sent him a tap from Garland, and he was the first guy. Took it all apart.
Yeah.
I figured out how to run it on USB instead of the plug-in, you know, the adapter. And next thing I know, I get this big email, and he's saying, "Hey, look at this," and very cool because we've applied it several times.
He's got too much time. He's got too much time.
No, he lives this stuff. I was going to say one thing though. There, a lot of people think that T-Shark and Wireshark. I know how to phrase this. Help me, Paul. But I mean, they're the same, but they're different.
Yeah, T-Shark is a command line version of Wireshark. I mean, Wireshark is graphical. T-Shark, we run T-Shark from DOS batch files.
Right.
For the simple reason that we can have a DOS batch file with 200 lines in it that will actually process 200 trace files, and it's very easy to create. So
and a lot of people are tying Snort to it also to do, to look for certain flags that are built in Snort. And as we begin to develop this, like you went from supporting the GUI to T-Shark, or command line, and then there's so many other add-ins we can expand. I'll get with Jasper. I'd love to have him come on, and Tony, of course. So I think as we develop the community, we can get people. I know Mike Panaki's written tons of code for Snort, and T-Shark. I think this is the beginning of a huge thing.
Yeah, I think this community is so rich and has so many dimensions to it. We in the past we have promoted people who are just individual contributors who uses Wireshark as a tool for their live, to professional endeavors. And now I think that here we're touching on people that are actually adding to Wireshark by having add-ons and building their own community. So I think this is a very rich, very target-rich environment. Hey, so why don't we try to release some of our real-time viewers back to the sandwiches, because I'm sure many of them are taking time out from the lunch hours. So, Paul, why don't you kind of give a summary then, and then we'll sign off.
Okay. Well, to me, troubleshooting problems, performance problems, when the obvious candidate for blame is the network. Whenever you get some sort of transient performance problem, anything that we can produce that can quickly confirm or prove otherwise that we do or do not have a network problem has got to be good. Transum's just one of those tools that can do that, and I really would like more people to give it a go, try it, give us some feedback, and let's push this forward. Yeah.
So this reminds me of like the music community. People try a chord and then they want to share it, right?
Yeah.
I was going to make one announcement, Danny.
Go ahead, Tim. Sorry, I cut you off earlier.
Just got the new report on hacks, or on breaches, excuse me. We're up to 466 reported major industry breaches, and of those, 84% are not even able to tell how many records were stolen or played with. But we do know that the number right now for sure is 140 million records have been stolen or compromised. That's just in the U.S. When you add UK and Western Europe, it's into the 350 million category.
Well, I am frustrated that nobody seems to be paying attention. The people that we elected to our office are not paying attention. They seem to be too concerned about the next election right now. So.
Or lunch or golf, one or the other, right?
Yeah. So well, but we got a dry powder ready, and the next time that there's something to talk about, we'll do the LMTV Homeland Security again.
Yeah, I will say one thing. At UK, the government in UK has taken a very firm stance with the United States, and they're trying to prosecute and capture these people a lot better. And the ITRC reporting about UK they're really trying to put better structures together to protect the government. So it's
okay.
We got a long ways to go, though. Long ways.
I know. It's frustrating as hell. Thank you, Tim. And Paul, anything else?
No, I'm done, I think.
Okay, so as soon as we get the roundtable together, for just user feedback and testimonial, we'll do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Tim. And with
Thank
that, we bid you goodbye. And we don't have a show next week. We might, so keep an eye on that. But we definitely have Tony Fortunato on the 18th doing a really back to the basic quick start guide for Wireshark. Thank you, and see you soon. Bye-bye.